Hi. Throughout my life, I've listened to pastors preach on forgiveness, and while they've been very good and have definitely laid a foundation in my life, I have realized that it was not until I had to walk through the path of forgiveness myself that I really understood it and how deeply that has impacted my own life. You see, many of us have had major hurts along the way. Life's path is hard. And some of those hurts can cut so deep that they leave scars. Hurts that truly change you. I know that I am not the same. My emotions are different. The way I see things are different. The way I respond to things are different. Not because I want to be different. It's my emotional response that has changed. I looked it up, and studies have shown that severe betrayal or heartbreak alters how your brain processes safety, trust, and relationships. But there are two paths that you can end up on: the path of bitterness or the path of what I call renewal. If you are not careful, you can be the one left in bitterness, which leads to bondage. You are the one that's truly suffering. What happens is you think about the betrayal over and over and over again, thinking and meditating on how much you have been hurt, thinking about how that hurt has affected those whom you love, which that almost even cuts deeper, thinking about what you wish you could say or wanted to say, dreaming about how if you had the chance you would confront someone or say something different. And that list can go on and on and on and on. But this leaves you in a perpetual state of not living a life where you thrive. You end up living in bondage and bitterness, reliving your greatest wound or betrayal over and over and over again. And being honest, I was so angry and hurt with what had happened that I had no desire to forgive. I had no desire to say I forgive. I wanted nothing to do with it. I felt that if I forgave, then I was accepting that what was done was okay, and it was not. And I think that is what was holding me back from forgiving. What happened was not okay. And if I forgave, then I was saying that it was, and I didn't want to say that because it wasn't. Or at least that's what I was thinking in my head, which, by the way, is a lie from the enemy. But at the end of the day, I was keeping myself in bondage. I realized one day that it was the enemy that was keeping me down now, not what had happened, but my own self and the enemy. It was the enemy that was putting the thoughts of what was done was not okay, repeating it over and over in my mind. And this is how the enemy works. He tells you truths mixed in the mud. He tells you things that are biblical, but with the flavor of darkness. The enemy would say that what I experienced was not what God would have wanted, which is true. However, he would mix in that I should be angry, I should be upset, I should be seeking vengeance like David would in the Psalms. You have every right to be upset because what was done was wrong. And do you see what was done here? Satan would use half-truths to get me to believe something, and then would mix in bitterness, anger, and that turns into bondage. It makes it seem biblical, but it's not. Because so bad during that time, I wanted to be a follower of God. And that's where it was kind of getting mixed up in my head. But what I did come to realize is that by not forgiving, I was only hurting myself and the ones that I love. I realized that I needed to forgive, even though the people did not believe that what went down was wrong. And to this day, I don't know where their heart is. But I needed to forgive for me. But I didn't know how to really do that. And even after listening to messages from pastors and going to counseling, I couldn't figure it out. So here is what God showed me, and I hope it may be helpful for you. First, I needed to ask for the desire to forgive. I did not want to forgive. I had the biblical right to say it was not okay, and I did not want to forgive. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a sinner, and I have done plenty to fall short. But in this particular situation, I was shattered. So I started to ask God to give me the desire to forgive. I was honest with God with my hurt. I was honest with Him on how this could have even been allowed to happen. I was honest with how angry I was. Psalm 62:8 says, "Trust in Him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to Him, for God is our refuge." I realized that I could be completely honest with God. I can tell Him that it was not okay, and I would hear back that I was right. It wasn't. I would ask Him how He would allow this to happen, and He would tell me that He gives everyone free choice, which, to be honest, was a hard pill for me to swallow. I would tell Him how angry I was, and He would softly be there for me, like in the wind, or the cool of the night, or the warmth of my blanket, or a smile on my kid's face. I would tell Him that I did not want to forgive, and He would say, "Ask for help, for His yoke is stronger than mine." So, the first step I took was asking for the desire to want to forgive. And this first step took some time, but I would talk to God about it often. "Lord, please give me the desire to forgive, because I just don't want to." And eventually, my prayers began to change. I started to meditate on a verse from Joshua. It says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." It's Joshua 1:9. I needed strength to forgive something that I did not want to forgive, strength to begin living a new life, a life that had so many questions and unknowns. I needed courage to stand on my faith, courage to hold my head up high, and take back my spirit, which had been crushed through horrible words and actions. I needed to not be discouraged when things were not going well, or when I was barely scraping by. I needed to not be afraid of the unknown and of my future. I needed to know that God was with me wherever I went. So I embraced this verse. About 2 years later, I would actually have this tattooed on my leg in my own way. It's there. When I would begin to fall in the trap of meditating on the wrong that had happened, I would begin to catch myself and then meditate on the verse. In the beginning, my meditation on the wrong, my trauma that was done, would be a lot longer than my meditation on the verse. However, as I got better at catching myself, the time spent meditating on the trauma became less and less and less. I was actually able to get to the point where I would say, "Satan, get out of my head." And then I would repeat that I had forgiven. I'd say, "Remember, Lord, I forgave," or "I'm forgiving. Give me strength." Notice that as time went on, my prayer went from "Give me the desire to forgive" to "I forgive." As time went on, when I did notice I was meditating on the trauma, I would ask God to take it away from me. I would ask God to give me His peace peace that surpasses all understanding. His peace. Peace that does not make sense, but it's Jesus's, his own peace. I would remind God that at this point I had forgiven, and I no longer have bitterness in my heart for what was done. However, I would still find myself thinking randomly about it, and that I needed the trauma to be released from me. I needed to live a life where I was thriving and no longer bound by my past. I started to pray for the people that had caused my trauma, for the very people that hurt me to my core. One day I was driving to work, and I was praying. And as I prayed for this person, I found myself giggling to the Lord. Wow, I've come a long way from wanting vengeance and hatred to actually praying for this person. It actually kind of shocked me. It made me realize that it was in that moment that I had actually forgiven. It was that moment that I realized that I had let go of the wrong and that I was now at peace. It did not excuse the wrong like I had thought previously, but it released it from my spirit, and I was finally at peace. I no longer needed medication to be next to this person. I no longer had to click a band around my wrist when I was with this person. I could be in the same room, sitting at the same table, etc., and not have any animosity towards this person. Now, don't get me wrong, there are boundaries, and those boundaries are in place for my protection, and they are healthy boundaries, but they are not filled with anger or spite. There are many verses about forgiveness, and many are about the need to forgive because God forgave you first. And while that is true, and boy, is that so true, those particular verses did not really resonate with me. I needed God to work on my heart because my heart had been broken. It had been shattered into pieces. I knew intellectually that I needed to forgive because I am a sinner. I knew the verses, but I needed a heart change. I needed to be comforted. I mourned, and I mourned hard for the life that was taken. But God met me where I was at. Blessed are those that mourn, for they will be comforted. This is a verse that I would also meditate on. It wasn't a forgiveness verse, but it was what I needed in the moments of my walk in order to forgive. What I will say is that God is so amazing. Walking through the pit of fire and despair has taught me a lot. It has actually made me a strong and courageous woman of faith. I learned to trust in Him, knowing that He will make all things good for those that trust. And when I say He will make all things good for those that trust, oh my gosh, I'm absolutely. I learned that I needed to take an active step in my faith. I needed to be honest with Him. I needed to talk with Him out loud and meditate on His word. For the words to me were not the verses of forgiveness, but verses that brought me to my knees and taught me how to forgive. They taught me the goodness of God and how, as His child, He loves me. God has restored the years to my life that the enemy stole from me. That you can find in Joel 2:25. And boy, is that so true. I live a much happier life, a beautiful life filled with countless joys and happiness. God gave me back everything that the enemy took from me and gave it back to me even better. Every once in a while, the enemy will try to steal my joy. And I've used the analogy that scar tissue sometimes hurts, but God is my strength and my healer. I chose to walk in victory. I chose to walk in strength and in courage. I chose to walk in renewal, and God blessed me because of it. Roads are hard. My road was a very broken road, like I'm sure many of yours are. My original dream had been shattered, and a new path was created. But this new path that I'm on is a blessing, and it is wonderful. I live in renewal, not in bitterness or bondage, and I live in peace. His peace and blessings flow throughout my entire being, and I could not be more thankful. Be honest with God. Do not deny your pain, and let Him show you your path. Meditate on the words that He gives you, for those will bring life back to you. Trust me when I say forgiveness is walking on that path of forgiveness is worth it. May God bless you, heal you, and may you walk in His peace and forgiveness into healing. And for the blessings far outweigh the trauma. God bless. God bless.